Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan and welcome to another ARC reading vlog. I'm so excited to get back on my game when it comes to vlogging. It's been a while. I'm a little rusty. Life has been lifing. I've talked about it in previous videos. We're not going to get into it here. What we are going to get into is the books because I've got 6 books that come out in June. I want to read each of them before their release dates. Probably by the time this video comes out, many of them will already have released, but I'm very excited about them. Actually, 5 of the 6 are thrillers, so it's a little bit thriller heavy. Bear with me. If you are a thriller reader though, get ready to hear the recommendations. Which books do I recommend you pick up right away? Which ones do I think you can probably skip? All right, let's talk about the books that I will be reading. I'll talk about them in publication order. I'm probably not going to talk too much about like my expectations or what they're about or anything. I'll save that for the clips when I talk about each individual book in detail, but kind of a rapid fire overview. First, releasing on June 4th is the only non-thriller of this video. It's called Stepping Off by Jordyn. This is actually a young adult contemporary book that I know I heard somebody online talk about and made me request it. At least I think I did. I just can't remember who it is, but this is going to be a very hard-hitting contemporary book, I think, that has to do with a high schooler going through family and friend changes. Then we've got a few books releasing on June 11th. So first we've got One of Your Kind by Nicola Yoon. This author previously has written young adult, like more contemporary books, but this is an adult thriller, so I'm very excited about it. Then we've got Lies Make Perfect by Ellie Banks. Another adult thriller. I have not heard of this book or author before. Definitely just the cover caught my eye. It looks like a pretty stereotypical adult thriller, hoping it catches me by surprise. Then we've got What Fire Brings by Rachel Housel Hall. I have not read from this author before, but I've heard good things about her thrillers and I've been wanting to give her a try. So hopefully this one is a win. Then let's see, 2 books coming out on June 18th. First, we've got The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley, pretty popular thriller author. I've read several of her books before, maybe all of them, and I've had kind of mixed luck, but we'll see what this one brings. And then last but not least, we've got The Next Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. This is a sequel to the book The Last Mrs. Parrish, which I didn't love when I read it. I feel like it's a trope that's been done a few times. I don't know who was the first, but The Last Mrs. Parrish was not the first that I read of that trope. So we'll see how the sequel does. I have no idea what the plot is, if it's changing course or kind of repeating themes of the first book. I'm not sure. I'm open. So those are the 6 books I'll be reading. Since there are so many books to feature in one video, I probably will just come back once I've finished each book. Then I'll give you a better full synopsis as well as my final thoughts and recommendations on each of the books. Okay, I've got some updates. I have actually flown through 2 of the ARCs, which I was reading simultaneously. One I was reading on my Kindle, the ebook version, and the other one I actually got an advanced listener copy, or ALC, through Libro.fm. So that worked out perfectly to help me get through these ARCs a little bit faster. But let's talk one at a time about my thoughts on them. So the first book, the one that I was reading physically, or ebook version, was Stepping Off by Jordyn. I really wish I could remember where I heard about this book from. I don't think I just picked it out on NetGalley, because while it did sound interesting to me, I don't think it's something that I would just request on a whim. I want to say I heard an influencer or somebody talking about an early copy of this book that they read, and it made me want to read it. This is a young adult contemporary book about our main character named Jesse, who is a guy who's in high school-ish age, and every summer his family goes to Pennsylvania where they have like a vacation home. Normally he lives in New York City, and he always covets this time as like he could be anyone he wants. He's got these 2 female best friends who he spends all of his summers with, and the book kind of sets it up like he's clearly attracted to both of them. He's in a relationship with neither of them, but they are all 3 very close friends. And we follow them through this summer where a lot of things happen to each of those characters, and we see how the main character, Jesse, reacts to them. This book started out really intriguing because these 3 main characters are pretty interesting characters, and it starts off with a tone that makes it clear that they are going to go through some rough times together. So I was definitely intrigued to see how that affected their relationship dynamics. Also with like the romantic and sexual undertones of their relationship. I was just curious to see where it went. However, as the book went on, I became less and less curious and less interested because things happened, but like this book has no plot. It's just about the really mundane and then the occasional emergency escalation type event in their lives and like how they react to it. There's nothing driving the actual story forward. So I struggled a lot with it. If you have watched my channel for a while and you've heard me talk about books, I really often need a plot to keep me engaged and to keep me wanting to keep reading the story, to find out what's gonna happen. Yes, I can also care about characters and fall in love with them, and I enjoy really emotional stories about things that characters go through, but there has to be a plot, and I was just completely missing a plot in this book. I do think it's possible that this book would really resonate with readers who have gone through similar experiences, especially around this same, young adult age as these characters. And so maybe it's helpful to those readers to read about a character also struggling through those things. But because I didn't have that personal relation to it, I think that also caused some distance. So unfortunately, by the end, I was really just not engaged in this book. I was disappointed. I ended up giving it 2 stars, which feels a little harsh, again, because there's nothing wrong with it. I was just missing a lot in terms of plot and engagement. I will say there are some content warnings within this book related to those things that people might relate to, but want to call them out. So there is death of a parent, death of a grandparent, discussions of going through COVID and people getting sick from that, and then divorce and parental issues. So that's stepping off. Unfortunately, not a great start to this vlog, and unfortunately, we're gonna continue this not so great trend because the next book that I read is One of Our Kind by Nicola Yoon. This is the one that I mentioned I got the advanced listening copy for. So I did listen to the audiobook version of this book and I enjoyed the audio version. I enjoyed the narrator. And this one similarly starts off with a very intriguing premise where we follow this woman who is a Black woman. She's married and she has a son, and their family has just decided to move into this all Black neighborhood where all of the people who live there are Black. She's really excited and intrigued because she's been struggling a lot with the news lately and just seeing tragedy after tragedy that seems to follow the Black individuals in the US. So she's ready to have people to talk to about it and to start, making action happen, to do her part to bring justice to these individuals and hopefully prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. Right from the start of this book, it's clear that there's something a little bit off with this neighborhood and with all the people she's meeting. Some of them are not quite aligned with her personality and what she's looking to do, which, is okay. Every person is allowed to have their own personality. And then she starts to notice shifts of how people are acting that she initially gets on really well with, and then all of a sudden there's a disconnect in their relationship. So she's not really sure what's going on, but at the end of the day, she's just trying to make the best life for her and her family. She's also pregnant with another baby on the way. So very intriguing premise, and it's very clear, or it seems like it's clear, that this book is going to have some really direct commentary on the treatment of Black individuals in the US and other racial topics. Where this book confused me and a lot of other readers is right at the end. And not to spoil where the book goes, because of course, if it sounds interesting to you, I think you should read it and form your own opinion. But the ending does not match the message you would think this book would have. And it left me with a lot of like, what was the point of this book type questions. And to be completely honest, at times I was wondering, am I even equipped to answer that question and to understand the point? I am not Black. That is very clear. My opinion on the message of a racially charged book is not the most important one. So I immediately went to go look at other early reviews of this book. And it's hard to get a true consensus of what people are thinking from early reviews because it's a very small number of reviews to read. But I did see some reoccurring themes in the reviews of BIPOC reviewers. And a lot of them really struggled with this book, with the point of this book, with the message of this book, and feel really strongly that it communicates anti-Blackness, and they feel really uncomfortable and offended by that. And so also, aside from my own confusions about the point of this book, the fact that it's rubbing so many BIPOC readers and reviewers the wrong way, I also have to want to take that into account and say that that of course makes me really uncomfortable, because I would never want to like excuse a book or talk highly of a book that I do think is doing harm to readers and reviewers. Again, that's not to say that people don't have their own opinions and that there aren't also positive early reviews. There are, but I'm seeing a lot of the negative that turns me off. I already wasn't a huge fan of this author. She wrote, I think The Sun Is Also a Star is what it's called, which was a young adult contemporary book that I gave 2 stars. It was very insta-lovey, just not really my type of story. So I was excited and interested in giving her another chance with this adult thriller. I thought it would align way more with my taste. So I am extremely extra bummed that this also did not work for me, and now this author is going on a list of authors I probably will not pick up again unless, you know, her next book gets rave reviews and I really am interested in the plot and the genre of the book. That all kind of has to align. But for now, I'm feeling really just disappointed, confused, unsatisfied by this book as a whole. And if you've read this book, especially if you're a BIPOC reader, I would love to hear your opinion on it. If you agree with me or you disagree with me. I think I'm always pretty open and honest that I believe everybody should be able to have their own opinions about books. So one, I hope that anything I said wouldn't offend you, but also I would be super interested in hearing more opinions so that I can just get a broader grasp of how this book is hitting, because it left me very weird feeling. So I gave it 2 stars. I definitely don't want to recommend it to people that I think it's going to do harm to, but at the same time, if it sounds intriguing and like something you do want to have an opinion on, I think there's room for more discussion about this book. I am off to continue reading more books. I'll be back with an update once I've finished at least one more of them, and we will keep this vlog going. All right. Things are not going great with this video. I have been reading the next book for this video called Lies Make Perfect by Ellie Banks. This is an adult mystery thriller that I requested completely on a whim. I had not heard of it before. The cover just caught my eye. I do think it's pretty, and it is a debut mystery thriller. So you're kind of always taking a risk with a debut author, right? You have nothing to prejudge them on. So I decided to request it. This is a mystery thriller about this woman who is a couple months into this situation where her child has been kidnapped by her husband. I guess they were on some pretty rough terms. So the husband took off with the kid, and the main character has been trying to get like the police to look for him, but she's not getting any traction. So she's taking things into her own hands and trying to find her husband and, more importantly, her kid. She is weirdly fascinated with true crime cases. She is actually an author who previously wrote a book on the cold case of her missing like previous roommate or best friend or something. And I guess because of that book being published, like the case was solved or something like that. So she's this writer and she's been stuck for a while wanting to write her next book. And this sounds like a basic enough but intriguing enough premise, obviously, for me to request the book. But oh my gosh, this is the most annoying main character and the most repetitive book I have read in a long time. I'm 47% into it, and we are spending so much time in this character's head and when she's talking to other people, and she is just cycling through the same 4 thoughts over and over, which are basically that like she's not crazy and she's not gonna find out that her daughter is dead, even though apparently that's what everyone is telling her, but she just keeps going over and over again like, nope, I'm gonna find my daughter. I'm gonna be the exception. I know true crime and I know the statistics, and yet I'm going to choose to believe the opposite, and I'm not crazy for that, which is a fair enough statement. I agree. You should keep the hope alive and keep looking for your husband and your kid. But the number of times she says that is just ridiculous. And then she goes back and like is thinking back about her relationship and what brought her to this point, and she just keeps repeating how distracted she was because she kept focusing on her writing or like getting lost in her own thoughts so that she wasn't paying attention to what was right in front of her. Like one time she nearly lost her kid in a park because her brain was elsewhere, and just her relationship with her husband wasn't good because she was constantly focusing on other things and not her kid and her husband. So she just keeps harping on the fact that like, yeah, I was really focused on my writing, but that doesn't mean I was a bad mother. Which again, fair enough statement to make. I just don't need to hear it 100 times. And then lastly, she's talking about how things with her husband were bad, and she had feelings for this other man, but she never acted on them. And now she's suspecting that her husband was having an affair, and that's part of the reason he ran away. And so she just keeps defending herself like, yeah, I had thoughts and feelings for another man, but I never acted upon them, so I wasn't a bad wife. And it's just, oh my God, it's constant the way we're just rotating through those thoughts, and she's speaking them to this guy who's helping her solve this case. I just cannot do it anymore. I am not even halfway through this book, and I can't even fathom reading any more of it. I truly do not care if this main character finds her husband or her child. She needs professional help, and this book needs something else to happen. But I'm going to DNF it, so I'm not even gonna stick around to find out if anything else does happen. I just don't care. So unfortunately, in this video, we've had two 2-star books and a DNF. So that's kind of rough. I'm really hoping this next book turns it around. I've started What Fire Brings by Rachel Housel Hall. So far, I'm the most intrigued and invested in this book out of all of them. It is going well. I hope it continues that way and I come on here with a good review, because this has been rough. But I'm gonna get back to reading that, and I'll be back with a better synopsis and my final thoughts once I finish it. Alrighty, I've got my next review to give. I don't have my regular tripod out right now, so you are balancing precariously on a cup of coffee. It's gonna be fine. All right, let's talk about What Fire Brings by Rachel Housel Hall. That is a very satisfying set of words and syllables. This is an adult mystery thriller. This author I know has written several other books, I think several other thrillers, but I have never read them before. I have heard generally good things, so I decided to just jump in with her newest release and see how I liked it. The good news is it went better than the other books that I've read so far for this vlog. The unfortunate news is it's not a new favorite or anything. I ended up giving it 3 stars. Let me try to tell you a little bit about what it's about. We are following this main character named Bailey, who at the start of this book is driving to like a writer's retreat type of situation. It's more like, oh, I don't know, like an apprenticeship or like a mentorship situation where she's going to meet with this one writer who's this guy who's like this really famous, renowned author, and he is taking her on to co-write his next book. The strange thing about this situation is that we find out early on that this main character is not actually a writer. She's just pretending to be. She's actually a private investigator or a PI in training who is there under false pretenses to try to figure out information about this other case that she is investigating. So we are following her while she is kind of acting and trying to play this role of this writer and getting to know this author, but then also doing her own investigation. It's a pretty interesting setup. It's a little bit confusing by nature because we're told right off the bat that this main character, this narrator, is keeping secrets from us, that we don't know everything about her and her life and her past. Also, she seems to have some like memory issues as well. So it's very clear from the start, we're not getting the whole picture. And so the rest of the story is kind of filling in those gaps and ultimately seeing if she can solve the mystery that she's there to solve. I did enjoy this book. It's a little bit slow moving because it's such an isolated setting. There's not a lot that happens, and we spend a lot of time inside this main character's head, which felt a little bit slow until right towards the very end. The action definitely picks up and I appreciated that. But for most of this book, I was kind of like, I'm interested, I'm a little bored, I'm ready to see where this is going. And so then once we got to the end, again, I was a little confused through a lot of it. So some of the twists and reveals were just a lot to, you know, wrap your head around, or wrap my head around, which is a little, you know, unsatisfying when a twist doesn't immediately hit and click. So I feel like I'm a little bit hesitant towards it, but once I like was done with the book and I sat with it for a little bit and it took a little time to like piece everything together in my head, I do think it was a good story and it did have a satisfying ending. I liked how everything ended up. Again, I liked the action towards the end of the book. I wish I wouldn't have had quite so much confusion around the main character and also other characters, but it also seems that that was the intention of the author to write it that way. So as you can tell, I'm a little bit, I don't know, iffy and conflicted about my feelings. Overall, I'm giving it 3 stars. I do think it was a satisfying book. I'm glad that finally I got something over 2 stars and that I actually felt like finishing. It's definitely not a new favorite thriller or anything, and probably not something I will super widely recommend, but it does make me curious enough to continue picking up more books by this author and hopefully find one someday from her that I really love and connect to. At least that would be the hope. I don't know if it'll be one of her backlist or one of her future releases, but yeah, that's how that book went. So 3 stars. We're trending in the right direction. I hope with one of the next 2 books that I have left in this video, I hope one of them is a real winner for me. We will see. I think I'm gonna go with the Lucy Foley book next. Fingers crossed we get something that's 4 or 5 stars, but yeah, I'll check in when I am finished with my next book and we'll see how it goes. All right, I've got some really unfortunate news to share because I have DNF'd yet another book. This video is not going well. I decided to DNF The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley at 52%. This is another adult mystery thriller. This one is kind of, I think, supposed to be like an isolated closed circle mystery. It's set at this location that's like this luxury resort hotel kind of place, but the rooms are these luxury cabins and it's right next to like these big woods, and we're following a set of characters that is staying there on that place's, I think it's called the Manor. So the Manor's opening night and opening weekend, we're following many different characters, and all we know from the very beginning is that the next day after the opening night, the Manor is on fire. So it's all about the buildup of what happens that night, all of these characters and their different relationships, and it turns out some of them have histories together and, you know, finding out what happens. I don't know. I don't know if it's a me thing right now. Mystery thrillers just really are not hitting, as I've said. It might also be a Lucy Foley thing. I honestly haven't had that good of luck reading her books before. I think I've read 3 of her past books: The Hunting Party, The Guest List, and The Paris Apartment, and I've given all of them 3 stars. So they've been completely fine and average, but nothing that really makes me excited to read more by her. So why did I request this book? I don't know. I knew it would be somewhat buzzy and hyped and talked about because Lucy Foley is a popular author, but so far nothing about her stories have really resonated with me. So I'm not that surprised that this one isn't either. And I think it's just something about, there's so much going on in this book. Like I said, there's that juxtaposition of like these luxury cabins in the woods. So it's like riches and outdoor woodsy kind of trying to play together. We also are following so many characters. I didn't count them, but we're following like the owner of the Manor, one of the employees who is a dishwasher bartender guy, the husband of the owner, and then a few of the actual guests. And not only are we getting all of their different perspectives, but we're also getting scenes from the past and the present and the future. If you're counting the night of opening night as the present and like the next day as the future, we're getting all of those timelines, and we're getting journal entries from the past. It's just a lot to like wrap your brain around. It's definitely more on the confusing side than not. Not that the storyline is a lot to keep straight because it's fairly simple. Again, it's just all of these characters and their interweaving relationships and dynamics. But it is a lot of characters to keep straight, which is something I often struggle with. And really the kicker is that I just don't care. I don't care what's going to happen to these characters. I don't care about any of them enough to care that they survive to live another day. I don't care to find out who has, you know, skeletons in their closet, who did things in the past. The book is also trying to do something with the woods and make it seem like there's something kind of creepy or scary, like living in the woods or watching them from the woods. And that's also not something that particularly calls to me, nor do I care to find out what's going on in the woods. So for all of those reasons, I am going to DNF it. I do think anyone who really loved specifically The Hunting Party and The Guest List probably will also enjoy this one, because it's clear then that you like Lucy Foley's writing style, and the actual mystery of this book is similar to the mystery of those books. The Paris Apartment I found to be pretty different. So again, if you enjoyed those books, I don't want to turn you off of it, but I do want to say it's really similar to those, and I didn't care for those. So for that reason, I don't think I'm going to enjoy the rest of this one. So I'm gonna put it down. I'm gonna DNF it. I'm gonna move on to the last book for this video and really hope that my luck changes and it redeems this entire thing. But I don't know, honestly, the hopes are not very high. I might have to break up with a lot of thriller authors after this, but we'll see. I'll be back with a final wrap up and consensus, tell you about that final book, and then we'll go from there. Okay, my friends, good news. I am back because I have finished the last book for this video, The Next Mrs. Parrish, which was my last hope to have a semi-successful book for this video. And I'm so glad to say that while this wasn't like a new all-time favorite book or anything, it at least delivered with what it was intending to deliver, which is a fun, entertaining, thrilling ride. So I am happy, and because I was actually invested, I pretty much flew through this book. I will say this is a sequel to a book called The Last Mrs. Parrish, which is also a mystery thriller, kind of a domestic thriller. I do remember enjoying that one. I don't remember what I gave it. Let me look. Actually, I gave the first one 2 stars, but interestingly, it's because it is similar to a few other thrillers that I've read. It does commonly get compared to one really popular big name thriller, and the reason people talk about it so vaguely is because it's like the same twist that really spoils the other book. Plus, I can think of one other thriller that I think also did the same thing. So it's not a super unique story, and that definitely hindered my enjoyment, because when I read The Last Mrs. Parrish, it was the 2nd or 3rd book with that same exact twist, which was definitely disappointing and not really a reflection of the book itself, because if it's the first time you're reading that twist, I do think it's good, and I gave those other books higher ratings, but more like an oversaturation of that exact story. So this book, the sequel, follows the aftermath of that first book, so it is all of the same characters, and you're picking up pretty soon after the events of the first book. So I'm not going to talk really in detail about anything about the plot of the second book. I will say I did not reread the first book before reading this one. And that's probably a question a lot of people will have about this sequel, because it did come out in 2017. It's been quite a few years since a lot of us have read it. So I didn't reread it, and I do think this sequel did a pretty good job of recapping the things that happened in the first book. You definitely do have to read the first book to understand everything that's going on, but if it's been a while, there are some clues and recaps to remind you of like specifically what the characters did to each other and remind you of their history and where they all stand. And I did really enjoy reading about the aftermath. I think it definitely differentiates itself from those other books that the first one was so similar to. This one felt different because it was a continuation. It didn't rely on that first twist to be like the bulk of the story and the bulk of the shock factor. This book is told in mainly 3 perspectives. 2 of them were from the first book. The 3rd one is a new character in this book. And I enjoyed all of the 3 perspectives fairly similarly, which is always a good thing. I will also say it felt like the stakes were a little bit raised in this book, because there are now more people involved, there are children involved, and now, you know, it's like when you wrong somebody once, you hope it goes well, but if you get caught out, you can usually pivot or make up an excuse or something like that. But if you try it again, then you're really in deep trouble if you get caught, if that makes sense. So it felt like with these characters, they all fully know what each other is capable of. So now they're trying to carry out these plans, even with these big targets on their backs, and even with knowing that they all don't trust each other. So I thought that was an interesting like extra layer of the character dynamics and relationships. Ultimately, I was entertained with where it went. Did it completely shock me and have something kind of out of left field that I was surprised by? No, but in general, I really liked how the whole storyline worked itself out. So I think I'm gonna give this one 4 stars, which feels so good after all of the other books in this video being pretty unsuccessful. I am happy with finally a 4-star rating. It's interesting that I gave this sequel in the series 4 stars after giving the first book 2 stars. I don't think that often happens for me or a lot of series readers. So with that, I guess this is my biggest recommendation out of this video. Out of all the books I read, this is the one I would recommend the most, especially if you did enjoy The Last Mrs. Parrish. And apparently, even if you didn't love The Last Mrs. Parrish, but would be interested in a continuation story, like me, you might like it even more than the first book. So hopefully that is a helpful review. Hopefully this was a somewhat entertaining video, even though most of the books were failures for me. I'm glad it's maybe not completely a me problem, and I can still enjoy books. I just haven't been for some reason. But going forward, hope I have better luck. But with that, that's all I have. Please let me know if you have also read any of the books I talked about. They are all now released. If you haven't read them already, let me know if I convinced you to pick up any of these books or maybe steered you away from one you were previously considering. And other than that, I don't think I have anything else. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.